It is a great pleasure to welcome Melody Rachel. She's a fellow podcast host. She hosts the You Know I podcast, and I'm assuming she's from New Zealand. How are you today, Melody? Thank you for joining the show.
I'm really good, thanks. Good to be here.
Yes. So I'm guessing I'm correct in assuming that you're from New Zealand, yeah?
Yeah, I live in Sydney, Australia, but I was born in Tauranga in New Zealand. No,
Mm-hmm.
Takapuna. I grew up in Tauranga.
I see. What would be the key difference between Australians and New Zealanders?
Australians and New Zealanders. Um, New Zealanders are more laid back, more chill.
Mm-hmm.
Australians are probably a bit more ruder.
Ah, I see.
But from anywhere else in the world, we'll say we're basically the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I visited Australia before, but not New Zealand. So I hope to visit New Zealand at some point.
Oh, you should go. You should go to the South Island.
Mhm. Yes. And I'm relatively always late on catching up on news, but recently New Zealand's been on the news today because there was a feminist, right? She was heckled by protesters, like trans
Oh, Posey
protesters.
Parker.
Yeah, that's her.
Posey Parker went to speak at the Let Women Speak event. That was on the
Mhm.
25th of March. And a good deal of trans rights activists showed up to it to protest her, to not let her speak, essentially.
I see. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the footage, but it depends what media outlet you're going to as well. A lot of mainstream media outlets in New Zealand are framing it as a positive, loving sort of rally.
Mhm.
But a lot of footage online tells a different story. So, Posey Parker got tomato juice poured on her head. Yeah, people were yelling and screaming and throwing things at her. I mean, wherever you sit on this debate, I would say that behavior is not great.
Mhm.
Like if you disagree with, yeah, I mean, it's a freedom of speech thing at the end of the day. Some people believe, those views harm the transgender community, so they shouldn't be able to say them. And other people think, well, regardless of, whether you like her opinion or not, she should have the right to speak, and then we can debate her ideas from there. But it seems like, yeah, there's a great deal of people that don't want to hear what she has to say.
I see. Yeah. What is Posey Parker's view regarding the debate, the topic of debate?
I mean, there's a, from my understanding, there's a whole faction of people that are call themselves gender critical feminists. Um, Posey Parker is, I would say, on the extreme end.
Uh,
And when I say that, I mean she's quite provocative when she talks.
mhm.
Um, yeah, she'll say things like, I don't know if I want to repeat them, but just really sort of, yeah, inflammatory things sort of against transgender people. And part of me
Mhm.
wonders, is it necessary to speak in that way? If you want to acknowledge biological sex and say, well, it's impossible to transition, I would say those are more on the vanilla end of gender critical feminists. But
Mhm.
yeah, she really goes for it.
I see.
So maybe that's why she got protested.
Mhm. Yes, I can see
There's
that.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, also a bit of controversy with her in Melbourne.
Uh,
Um, yeah, I mean, there were a group of Nazis that showed up to her event. Some say they were in support of her. Other people say they just randomly showed up. They had no affiliation. But yeah, it depends what news outlet you listen to, I suppose.
I see. Well, we are already off to the deep end here with controversial topics involving trans radicalism and apparently Nazism.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know one of my recent podcast guests, as I'm sure you know, is Kathleen Stock, and she is, I think she considers herself one of the gender critical feminists too, and she was very helpful in, I guess, enlightening my perspective on the debate. And before that, I did talk to Zoe Boot of Quillette, whom I got to know your podcast from about the issue. And I'm of the opinion that uh, transgender people deserve all the legal rights that are accorded to everybody. That's the classical liberal principle. But
Absolutely.
nevertheless,
Yep.
but nevertheless, they don't get to redefine or reconceptualize how we view gender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I sort of am of the opinion that we should be able to have different beliefs. And, if someone wants to define a woman as anyone who says they are one, then go for it. If someone wants to define it as biological sex, like go for it. I suppose, yeah, when it comes to policy affects people, right? So what policy? We need a clear definition for policy. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see where it goes. I'm trying to keep my mind open to, what both people say. Like you said, people have the right and the freedom to exist as they are. But the question is, does that collide with the rights of women? That's the gender critical view. But yeah, just have to keep researching it and formulate your own opinion.
Yes, of course. And it does bring me to a topic that I'm sure you've touched on your own podcast, which is I guess what I would call the politics of identity, in that when someone ascribes to themselves a certain set of identity traits, they would want the larger society to recognize it. For example, I guess you yourself are, I guess, gay, lesbian, and also Christian. So you would prefer to be recognized on both of these counts. And in Western countries, and especially America in general, where uh, I think before the Supreme Court decision that I guess solidifies the rights of gay men and women to marry, there was a very heated cultural war between gays and Christians. And so if you happen to be both of those categories, you probably feel quite alone. So I'd like to hear from your perspective on that.
Being gay and Christian. Yeah, I always thought about it as those identity labels sort of say what I am, but they don't really say anything about who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tried to drift away a little bit from, yeah, the term Christian. It's interesting. I always just used to say lover, like I love Jesus. I'm not a Christian because I feel like there are a lot of people who are Christians who actually don't even know who Jesus is.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of gay, yeah, it's interesting because Jonathan Haidt talks about this. He talks about there's two ways you can look at identity politics. Like one of them is to say, to use it in a good way, to say, oh, my brother and my sister, they're struggling. They don't have the same rights as us because of their identity. For example, gay people can't get married pre-2015. They can't get married. So they need to form an identity and elevate their identity together, so we can lift them up and give them the same rights as us. But what I see happening with identity politics today is it's being weaponized. We're weaponizing identity. This is the hypothetical power structure of, if you're a straight, white, cis man, you're everything that's wrong with the world. If you're a black trans woman, you're the most marginalized. So what you say has more value.
Mm-hmm.
It's this idea of who is saying something as opposed to what is being said. And I believe the latter is much more important. What's being said is much more important than who's saying it. But yeah, back to your question of gay Christianity. Yeah, I often feel alone. Sometimes it's weird. I've got, gay friends who don't understand that, how can you be part of a community or church that oppresses us? And then I've got Christian friends who don't understand how I'm gay because they're like, oh, well, how can you be part of, it says in the Bible that being gay is wrong. So how can you do both things? And yeah, I think in being able to accept myself was the realization that these are not really who I am. These these identity labels: gay, Christian. This is what I am. These are things I'm, if anything, a tiny percentage of who I am. There's much more that makes up me than just being gay or being a Christian.
Mhm. I understand. I'm guessing you're familiar with who Andrew Sullivan is, right?
And maybe
Yes.
Andrew Sullivan rings a bell. It rings a bell.
He's a British American journalist, and he's also a gay Christian Catholic in
Really?
particular, and he writes a great deal about being both, and he was instrumental in the fight for gay marriage in the United States. So
Okay, I'll have to look him up more.
yeah, he's a profound thinker. And you mentioned that lots of Christians or people who proclaim themselves to be Christians do not know Jesus is. And since we are in Easter season, how would you describe Jesus Christ? Who is Jesus to you?
He's a spirit
Mhm.
to me. Like if you understand, like, quick breakdown of Christianity, you have the Trinity. So you have God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So they're three in one. I don't understand the full theology of it. I'm not a theologian, but that's the basic doctrine or teaching. So the idea is God sent his son, Jesus. Most people know the story, to die for humanity's sin. He was crucified on the cross and then rose 3 days later, and then back to heaven he went. And he gave people the Holy Spirit, which I believe is the thing that exists in us. So when I say Jesus, I'm talking about the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit represents good fruit of the Spirit. So things like patience, kindness, compassion, love, joy, all these things sort of make up who Jesus is in my understanding. And then yeah, the sin nature is maliciousness, envy, jealousy, hatred, selfishness, all the bad things. So yeah, when I say I have a relationship with Jesus, I mean I'm slowly being sanctified or understanding his spirit and his heart, which I believe exists inside me. And it's a constant battle between the sin nature, which some people call the flesh, or the evil nature in us, and then the good nature is Jesus, the spiritual nature, the holy nature, however you define it.
Yeah,
That's Jesus to me.
yeah, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I think it was from the Gospel of
Yeah,
Matthew.
you know it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I guess I would call myself a Christian too. I was baptized as a Catholic last year.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm quite eager to speak to you about this particular topic.
Well, Catholics are like, yeah, like being a Christian just means you have Jesus in you, sort of, right? And then there's lots of different denominations and stuff, but Catholics are Christian as well,
Yes,
my understanding. Yeah.
yes, I hope so. So, were you raised in a Christian household?
Yeah, I was raised in a Christian home, so my parents actually came from a Jehovah Witness religion. So that, yeah, they have some extra beliefs. I believe they think only a certain amount of people are going to heaven. You're not allowed to celebrate your birthday. You're not allowed to celebrate Christmas. They think it's all, yeah, since it was not celebrated in the Bible, I think they take things quite literally. But it was way heavy on religion and not so much about having Jesus inside you and being kind and compassionate and loving. And I think that's how you can often tell the difference between religious people and Christians. Like, if you're a Christian or a lover of Jesus, you have his spirit in you, causing you to behave in a way. If you're just religious, you're sort of following like a rule book, and you're not being compassionate, and you're not being kind, and you're not being patient. So that's how I would probably describe, yeah, Jehovah Witnesses. Sorry, not sorry.
Yes. Did you know that Prince converted to the Jehovah's Witness religion?
Prince, is this a singer?
Yes, Prince the artist. The artist.
Man,
Yeah, there was a
why would you convert to Jehovah Witness? I thought it was just an old school religion that our parents came from. Yeah. I mean, yeah, interesting.
yeah.
I don't know why you would convert.
I think it was in the mid to late 90s where I think he was his wife was having a baby and then they had a miscarriage and he was like spiritually broken at that time and he joined the Jehovah Witnesses
Right.
faith.
And it would have been quite prominent in the 90s. So yeah, maybe that's why.
Yes. When I visit Australia, like the those people they have the all the literature including the Bible stand jw.org. They are
Yeah.
my first exposure to Christianity, or at least yeah, or at least the Bible version of Christianity. Just very funny.
Interesting. Yeah, I have seen them. I just try to stay away.
Mhm,
I mean, be kind, but I don't think that religion would do me any good.
mhm. I think would you say that Jesus is accepting towards gay people?
I am still reckoning with that. I wouldn't say accepting. I wouldn't say affirming. A lot of LGBTQ Christians say Jesus affirms my sexuality. I don't use that language. It's not that I disagree.
Mhm,
Um, I just remember when I met God at 25 and he was just, I felt him. And you don't hear God by like an audible voice. It's often in your thoughts. I mean, unless I'm crazy and he doesn't exist.
mhm,
But let's just say I believe he does. Um, he just used to I used to have a conversation with God and I used to say, "Oh, but I'm gay, I'm gay, I'm gay." And I just heard back like, "Come to me, I know you. I know you." And I just felt that that was the thing that stopped me from becoming a Christian for so long. The fact that I was gay, the fact that I feel like I couldn't know God, because that's what I was told in church. It was told, well, some people were on the extreme end would say things like, well, you're going to hell if you stay gay. Gay people can't be one of the Lord's people. And then some of the more the less extreme stuff was, oh well, we love you, we just don't love the sin. Love the sinner, hate the sin. Um, that's wrong, but we still like you. Sort of things like that. So there was kind of a spectrum of things that were said to me. Um, but in terms of Jesus accepting me for being gay, I think he just wants to know me. I don't think it matters.
mhm,
He wants a relationship. He wants a relationship with everyone. He wants to call me in and call us into a relationship. He doesn't call people to be straight. He doesn't necessarily call people to stop sinning. It's kind of impossible. We can't stop sinning. I mean, sin is just entrenched in our human nature, unfortunately. So when you get to know God, he makes you more whole, but that's a journey between you and Jesus. That's not for other people to start saying, oh, you're gay, so you can't know Jesus and blah, and all this stuff. And it's just like, I mean, he said it in the Bible as well, take the log out of your own eye before you judge a speck in your friend's eye. Yeah. So there's
mhm,
no judgment from Jesus. There's judgment from other Christians, but there's not any judgment from him.
mhm. There was a time when I was very familiar with what you call new atheist literature, like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris. I
Sam
still
Harris, yep.
follow.
Love Sam Harris.
Yeah, he's incredible. He's a profound
Mhm.
thinker. Um, so I know that their logic in like sort of like debunking the I guess theological basis for God and Christianity. There it's logically sound, but I still have issues with it. But what they emphasize, the reason why people should move away from religion is that they believe that it causes ordinary people to harm either their fellow men or even their own children. And if you read Richard Dawkins, he actually has like a website or a hotline for people to email their horror stories about being abused as kids in the name of religion, either by their parents or by their church members. And of course, my church, the Catholic Church, has a very severe history of child abuse too. And in America, there's the Southern Baptist Convention. They have been recently been exposed as for a massive abuse and cover-up scandal. So I think that's why people decided that they don't want to be a Christian or they leave their faith because they believe that it's God Himself through the I guess the hands of other people that condemns them, so to speak.
Well, that's when you need to start differentiating between religion and being a Christian, because some of the worst acts committed in the world are in the name of religion. They're not in the name of Jesus. If you knew Jesus, which is, like I said before, love, compassion, grace, kindness, patience, if you knew Him, you wouldn't commit those acts. But instead, what these people are doing is they're taking a book, they're taking it literally, they're reading it without the Spirit inside them. They're looking at things, oh, okay, cool. So it can't be homosexual. Oh yeah, cool. Okay, got to get married. Okay, cool. Got to not steal. Like it's moral restraint in a way. It's not supernatural change of the heart. Yeah, I mean it's very important that we differentiate between religion and actually knowing Jesus and having Him inside you. But it's just, it's unfortunate. I mean, again, you've got the Westboro Baptist Church who stand on the side of the road saying, God hates you. It's just like, it's so obvious to me that there is just such a false representation of God, because if He represents love and all the good things that I'm saying, then how can He hate you? That's human. That's human nature. That's our fallen nature that has done things like that. And it's also humans' propensity to be right can just blind us from just knowing anything. Like it's people just, religious people just act so certain. They're so certain that they have the truth. They don't allow anyone else to sort of sway them, which I guess, it can't be a good thing. I think we need to keep remaining uncertain and keep our mind open to pursue truth. We can't just pretend that we know everything just because it says something in a book. Like we still need to learn how to even interpret the Bible. You know, is the Bible an account of history? Is it the supernatural God breathed word of God? Like keep figuring out what that is. Some people are like, oh, it's obvious. It's God breathed. That's it. Homosexuality is a sin. It's like, you got to watch how people act. You know, you can have a straight, I keep going back to the gay Christian thing, but you know, you can have a straight Christian who's in a heterosexual marriage, but just exude all these qualities of bitterness and, you know, malice, hatred, just resentment. And then you could have a gay Christian who exudes qualities of, you know, love, kindness, peace, patience. So it's like, what is the true Jesus? I would say the person who's exuding the gentle qualities of God's heart. That's the true Christian, not someone that's just following a rule book claiming that they're a Christian.
Yes, of course, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And since you brought up the Westboro Baptist Church, did you know that the founder of that church, Fred Phelps, he used to be a civil rights lawyer?
Really?
Yeah, he started
In
out as a
favor
civil
of
rights lawyer. He lived during the 60s, and he represented, Black clients against like racially prejudiced people. And it's the same conviction that led him to defend, I guess, Black people against racism that got him to establish this church, which is a very bizarre thing when you think about it.
Well, it just goes to show there's some good in him, but he's unfortunately been taken over by his sinful nature.
Yes, and I think the Christian invocation or the religious Christian invocation that that the war is fallen is something that affects not just the Westboro Baptist Church, but a lot of the faithful in Catholics and Protestants and even religious Orthodox churches too. And it's this idea that who like humans are getting closer and closer to, I guess, Sodom and Gomorrah, and they because they, by being kind of angry and grumpy and being against everything, they see themselves as part of the 10, 20, or 50 citizens of Sodom who are worthy of God's rescue. That's that part in Genesis, right, where Abraham was reasoning with God, saying that if there are 10 righteous citizens in Sodom, then will God spare the city? God says yes. And I think it started with 50 and then 20 and then 10. But then, of course, God destroys Sodom too. So I think most of these like urban fundamentalists, they believe that that is the case, that we are fallen.
That
And
there's like a modern day Sodom and Gomorrah,
yeah.
and that's the West, that's the gays. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of those stories in the Old Testament, we don't know if they actually happened or whether they're, like you said, urban myths.
Mhm.
There's theologians that would have studied this to figure out, what's actually going on here. But yeah, we can't take the Old Testament literally.
But
And
yeah.
the people who are saying that, like, how are they acting? How are they behaving? Are they exuding like self-righteousness and all the crappy qualities that a non-Christian would represent, but they're just saying they're Christian?
Uh-huh. I see. I think in regards to the Old Testament, there are a lot of great, interesting stories and lessons
Yeah.
there. Well, of course, the Hebrews take the Old Testament seriously because that is their Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And there are stories about people with virtues, but also with like grave flaws. For example, the King David, and we learn from the triumphs of David, but we also learn that it can lead to hubris, and it can lead to a tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to move on to a broader topic in that I think that this fundamentalist idea of doomsday is coming has a secular version too, and it shows up in almost any identity group that perceives themselves to be marginalized. For example,
Mm-hmm.
obviously the trans people and the, I guess, the more radical Black Lives Matter activists in the US of A. Um, and most of all, there's the those climate change people that likes to deface Renaissance and modern art
Yeah.
to prove their point. I wonder if the was it radical climate change activism is like a thing where you are down under.
It is, yeah, and it's difficult because there's so much radicalism in that movement that it's hard to listen to. As in, if you've got a real problem, like if climate change is a real problem, and then you've got people saying things like, we're gonna, the earth is gonna go so hot in like 10 years that we're gonna die. It's sort of, it sounds so outlandish that it's difficult to listen to. Yeah, in the conversation, there's not, I don't even know if I'm a good person to answer this because I just stay out of it. But yeah, it's, from my understanding, it is an issue, but no one's come to some clear solutions as to how do we resolve this problem. I mean, it seems to be a lot of people just virtue signaling. We're doing their silver straws or paper straws or whatever. I'm just like, man, like what? Yeah, how do we resolve this? How do we resolve this issue down here? But yeah, people really hold on to these. It's like this activist stuff, like whatever you support. It's, especially when young people do it. It's hard for me to take it seriously and be like, okay, like are you actually, do you actually care about the planet, or are you just signaling your virtue, posting it on Instagram to look like a good person? Like there's so much noise. It's like what is the, yeah, what's the solution? What's the reasonable argument here? I'm not saying I don't believe in climate change. I'm just saying there's so many noisy people. How do we have a conversation about it and move forward? Maybe the conversation now is, nuclear energy
I see.
as opposed to coal. Yeah.
I would like to point out that, I hear the phrase virtue signaling being thrown out a lot these days, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a signifier in that now we've moved pretty far away from the culture where we value virtue in people. Um, I believe one of my favorite philosophers is Alistair MacIntyre. He's a Scottish Catholic, and he wrote this book called After Virtue. And in it, he argues that modern culture, with its preoccupation on the idea of freedom versus equality, have I guess moved away from the traditional notions of virtue from Greek to Christian and alike. And he believes that it is time that we remember that as human beings we should cultivate these virtues, and it
To be
can,
genuinely
yeah,
virtuous.
yes, and of course, virtue signaling is in itself not a virtue. It is obviously in the Bible too. When Christ says that there's a story about someone who goes to the temple and then he donates like a buttload of his own money, and then there's one man who's standing praying very far away from the temple, and he was praying that God would forgive him for his sins, and the man who's like vigorously praying is the one who's a truly virtuous religious person, rather than the man who donates a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about, there's a few other examples as well, like worshipping, clanging gongs in the street, showing people that you're worshipping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Haidt said another interesting thing in his book, The Righteous Mind, Why We're Divided by Politics and Religion. He said we want to be seen as good rather than actually be good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because it's easier. It's easier to portray yourself in a way to be seen as good as opposed to actually be good. I think being good takes effort. It takes self-sacrifice. And yeah, self-sacrifice is a hard thing to do. I don't even know if I do it half the time. Like, at the core of someone who's a virtue signaler is probably someone who feels pretty shit about themselves. So they want to feel better. So someone described it as it's self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
You give money to the poor, but you're doing it so everyone can see you do it. So you're actually, instead of serving this poor person, even though objectively you're giving them money or whatever, you're serving yourself. So yeah, it's sort of like woke culture. It's sort of replaced genuine compassion with the sense of moral superiority. Like, look at me, I'm attending these protests, or I'm saying all the politically correct things. I'm like for the people. But it's, yeah, especially it seems to have captured young people. And I can't work out why that is. And it's also, you can line that up next to religion, and religious people do the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, look at me, I'm not having sex before marriage. I'm straight. I go to church on Sunday. Like, see, I'm a good person. So it just must be human nature. We're just trying to find a mechanism or ideology that suits us, and then so we can do that. But yeah, I think being good, like being genuinely good, is actually really hard.
Yes, and I think people struggle with doing it every day, and we fail at it, and we ask God for forgiveness. Yeah, we receive penance, and then we go and I guess mess up in one way or another.
Always.
Mm-hmm. So I haven't gotten to like why you started the podcast, and what's the name of the podcast come from? That's the name of it.
So when I met Jesus and when I was 25, I told you before, I kept saying to him, oh, I can't know you because I'm gay. And he just kept saying, but I know you. And then I kept saying to him, I know you. Like I just felt like I had such a relationship with Jesus. Well, the word in my head, or the phrase in my head was, I know you, I know you. And then, 4 or 5 years later, I created a theater show. It was my fourth solo theater show. I just flipped it. I don't know why. I just flipped the words. So I know, you know, I know you, you know, I don't know why. It's just a random idea that came to my head. A theater show was a flop, but after I did that theater show, I was like, oh man, like I really just, I'm an avid consumer of podcasts. I really love like hearing different perspectives and different ideas. And I thought, oh, maybe I can do it. Maybe I can try do it. And then, I had no idea what to name the podcast. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take the name from this flop theater show and just call my podcast that until I can either come up with something better or maybe it'll stick. I don't know. But I often find, trying to come up with a name or a title for your podcast could often deter you from just starting. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start. This is it. You know, I think I like it. I've had some good feedback. I don't know. I think it's unique. I'll just go with it, and then if I decide to change it later, I'll change it.
Yes, of course. And it's a very catchy name. It just rolls off the tongue, isn't it?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, the current name of this podcast, well, is it Unlicensed Philosophy? It kind of came to me in an accident because there's this great philosopher in the U.S. His name is Leon Kass, and he calls himself an unlicensed humanist. And I guess since I've become way too interested in philosophy, I thought, that's an apt title, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so going back to our discussion about identity politics, how would you conceive of, I guess, identity, the word, and I guess your own personal identities?
I think identity means self-concept, how you see yourself. Perhaps even how you portray yourself to the world. Identity. In terms of identity politics, do you mean like the things that I feel make up who I am?
Yeah, I can say the same thing.
Yeah, I think we should form our identities based on the things we do or things we're interested in, not the categories we fit into, like lesbian, like gay, Christian, white, I don't know, gender non-conforming, blonde. I mean, these are just what I am, not who I am. So I should formulate it maybe on my interests. I love to surf, I love to dance, I love theater, I love conversations, I love people, I love Jesus, I love, going to the gym, I love waking up early. Yeah, I think maybe, or even qualities. I feel as if I'm a generous person. These are all forming my self-concept. They're being fed back to me by the things that I do. Or, I feel like I'm kind, so I feel this forms my identity. But then that can also happen in reverse. So say if I do something selfish or I do something unkind, then I'm like, oh shit, is this forming my identity too? Am I unkind? Am I selfish? I think I'm all those things, and I just exude them at different times. I think everyone is all those things. But yeah, I'm trying to get away from identity politics per se, especially because I don't think it matters today. But like gay identity, I don't think it matters so much today. We sort of just want to. There's two kinds of gay people that exist. I feel there's people that just want to say we're here, we're queer, we're everywhere, this is who I am, and then there's just the rest of us that just want to fit in and say, oh, there's actually nothing that makes me different from anyone else. It's just same-sex attraction, like that's it. We just sort of want to fit in. want to have kids and just go about our lives, not feeling like we're any different than anyone else.
I see. So I
We're all
think
human.
yeah, of course the concept of identity, as you've correctly defined as self-conception, is actually a very modern one, because the concept of the self is not thoroughly solidified until, was it Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote that book, Confessions, which is
Hmm.
the first modern autobiography. And I think that was the first time that a person, you know, uh, thinks of himself as an individual amongst all other individuals, and he conceives of his own life through a narrative, through a series of events that change him and that shaped him and led him to who he is. And I think much of what we call much of the adherence to identity politics, to me, comes from two, I guess, causes. One is that if you feel yourself to be a marginalized person, then you would invoke your identity as part of your character and as part of your politic, and as a demand for recognition. Um,
Maybe I don't feel marginalized today in the West. Maybe that's why.
let's see.
I mean, another one I feel, female. There are a lot of other females that feel in the West we are marginalized.
Mhm.
I would argue, we've got certain things stacked against us, but not enough for me to start calling myself a feminist and going to rallies. And I mean, things like sexual assault, I think, are, you don't have to be a feminist to think that that's wrong.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's just
Mhm.
inhumane behavior. Like, obviously, the feminist movement stands against that. But I don't label myself as a feminist. I don't agree or disagree. I agree with and disagree with different parts of it. But it's my own internal feeling of, am I marginalized as a woman? Am I marginalized as a gay person? I mean, I'm not marginalized as a white person, obviously. But it's weird. I don't know. I sometimes feel like people get entrenched in victimhood as well.
Mhm.
I mean, man, I've had it pretty hard growing up in a conservative Christian home being gay. Like, I've definitely had family members tell me, I'm a sinner, and church members tell me I'm wrong, and that's hurtful. But I just don't think in the greater society that I am marginalized.
Yes.
And I don't know, maybe I have some more conservative values in terms of, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get on with it. I'm sure there's ways in which I'm, men are sexist towards me or people are homophobic towards me. But I just see that as, human kindness, human in kindness. What's the opposite of kind? Like, I just see that as people being dickheads. And I guess I put people into, am I allowed to swear? Dickhead. That's not really a swear word, is it? I kind of categorize people as assholes and non-assholes, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you're going to be an asshole to me or whatever, might be homophobic, it might be sexist or whatever, but it's like, you're just being an asshole. Like, on to the next one. I don't feel like things are stacked against me because I'm a woman or because I'm gay.
And I think the second, I guess, source of what do you call I guess, the fervor towards that many practitioners of identity politics have, is they believe that identity is fixed, and they would rely on certain, like, fixed traits of their own person, say skin color and gender, not until recently, and sexual orientation, as as their, I guess, leverage against for recognition and against marginalization. But the thing is that even if you have these fixed characteristics, which everybody has, you have a multitude of other characteristics that are constantly subject to change. And I think the view of personal identity, in the sense that your life is kind of a narrative, in that there are events that happen to you that shape who you are and change
Mhm.
who you are, and it lets you open to the idea that you're not a fixed person, and despite your fixed characteristics. I think if people conceive of that identity politics as such, it'd be great. But there's also the other argument brought forward by, again, McIntyre and other people who are of a similar persuasion as him, called communitarians. They believe that your identity, your individual identity, is not wholly shaped by yourself. Is established by the relations which you have to other people.
Mhm. I agree.
So,
Well,
so
there's that whole saying, you are the 5 people you hang around with.
mhm,
Yeah, we've all heard that saying. Yeah, it's also interesting. What came to my mind was personality.
mhm,
Like, we have our identity, but then personality, and like I can't really think of how I'm differentiating between those two things. Like, maybe I'm using them to mean the same thing, but our personality and our temperament, as far as I know, we sort of have throughout our life.
mhm,
But changes, yeah. Whenever I think of change, I've changed politically throughout my life, which I thought sort of thought that was fixed. But it's like, yeah, if you've got, I think it's, yeah, like if you've got sort of radical left wing people telling you that you're a victim and or that you're wrong, you might shift towards the right. But then if you've
mhm,
got right wing people saying, oh, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, whatever right wing policies are, it might shift you to the left. So I always feel that I'm always being swayed in both directions in that sense. But I feel like my personality and temperament, actually, maybe not temperament. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting topic. I don't.
mhm. I
Are
think
we fixed? Yeah,
mhm,
I mean, we're ever changing, but we're ever staying the same.
mhm. Yeah, that just kind of supports my theory on, how a an aspect of your identity is invoked and emphasized when you feel yourself to be marginalized. Because, for
Mm.
example, there are obviously in the US, there are a lot of people who are fans of Trump, and they are like really fervent fans of Trump. And I believe that they started out as merely mild fans of Trump in that they don't like his personality, but they agree with some of his like policy points and such. And then
Mm.
when they say so, they get attacked by the Twitterati mob leftists, and they suddenly feel themselves to be the marginalized person, and they double down on their support for Trump.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that.
And I think obviously you and I both know that there's a rise in political extremism in the Western world. You have your identitarian left and you got your populist right, and
Mhm.
they are stuck in this trench warfare, and then people who are moderate on the left and the right, and people who are genuinely committed to liberal values are stuck in the middle, I guess, taking fire from both sides.
It's really hard to stay in
Undeservedly.
the middle. It's really
Yeah.
hard to stay in the middle because I believe we're inherently tribal. And again, this is, the thing with social media, it amplifies that nature, that tribal nature. It actually feels good to go and look at something that feeds my own ideas back to me.
Mhm.
And to be able to listen to the other side, it's like, yeah, I suppose the internet's just full of each side making a caricature of the other side. So it's like you're not really getting the full conversation or how people really feel. But yeah, I mean, I agree. People are increasingly becoming polarized, and it's amplified by social media and the online digital news and things like that. Um, I think the best thing is to just to try and find. Claire Lehman actually said this to me. I met her at a
Mhm.
Quillette event, but to emphasize commonality,
Mhm.
it goes against our nature. We're naturally tribal, but if we can put an effort to emphasize commonality, then we'll feel less polarized. But you're not going to do that on Twitter.
of course. That's
You're
why
not
I.
going to emphasize the commonality. Like it's when you get face to face that you're more humane because you're in front of someone. You know, you can see them and you can see how they feel. But yeah, I think we've just got to keep trying to put in the effort and go against our natural nature that sees the other person with a different opinion as the enemy. Yeah, it's hard to do, but
Yes.
the first step is to know it, right?
Mhm. And yeah, I was thinking about the parable of the Good Samaritan when because
I love it.
yeah, yes, this guy who was like sort of like neglected by every member of his his tribe, so to speak, the Jews. But then
Mhm.
a Samaritan came in and he provided him with care and medical and of course other other types of care. And it shows that even a non-Jew is capable of that kind of compassion that even like members of the Jewish tribes do not have.
Mm. Mhm. Because it's about the heart,
Yes.
right?
Mhm. And I think Christianity and liberalism are two of the ideas that helped us to, I guess, transcend our, I guess, natural born illiberalism. Our innate adherence to what's close to us, like family, tribe, nation, and such.
Mhm.
Um, and it and I'm that's why I'm rather dismayed by the fact that currently in the Western world there are a few really thoughtful individuals who categorically reject the key tenets of liberalism, the classical
Mhm.
version of it, in order to appeal to the more tribal nature, because, like say, their religion, their nationality, and such. They call I think the media calls themselves post liberals, but they would go by other names. But essentially, they believe that liberalism, in its universal appeal, it promotes relativism, and therefore, there is no absolute truth, and therefore, everyone follows this Nietzschean will to power thing. So whatever idea that carries the most intensity and has the most followers becomes the truth, and therefore they don't believe they believe that liberalism provides fertile ground for that. I don't know if that's
Is it because liberalism is like majority rules? Liberal democracy is like they create policy on the majority, and it's not
um
always majority,
I
which
say
is right.
I say an illiberal democracy would be a regime where the majority rules. But when you talk about liberalism, you refer to the framework of rights that everyone has, and the affirm equality of opportunity for everyone especially a multicultural, multiracial society. And the identitarians, they reject it because they believe that the universality of liberalism denies certain unique aspects of their inherited identities, cultural, religious, and otherwise. And
Right.
the right rejects it because it breeds ground for like competing political ideas to gain power.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oof. You know more than me on this.
So thanks. I read a lot.
Yeah. Well, you encourage me to. Yeah. I don't know what to say about that.
Okay.
No comment.
So tell me about the I guess the politics and the culture where you are in Australia, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, I would say our political divide over here is like nothing compared to the US. Um, I would just it's all culture.
Mm.
This is what young people, I believe, all their political affiliations is based on culture. So the Greens proponents, the left-wing government proponents of, I promote identity politics more than, and the right promotes identity politics in another way. But I don't know. I don't think they're that different. The Labour is the Liberal Party, and then the Liberal Party is the Conservative Party. All I know is our economy is great. It's a really good place to be if you want to earn a good living. But yeah, politics, the political landscape, I don't know enough about it to comment about it.
And of course, who would have thought that the beacon, a beacon for free thought, Quillette, originates in Australia? You would have thought that
there's a lot more I think we do really value things like freedom of speech over here. And I mean, Rupert Murdoch, that owns the right-wing media, is over here. So there's, in my opinion, it's balanced. With somewhere like New Zealand, the media is predominantly left-wing. So in my opinion, I felt like I didn't get a balanced view of things over there. In my opinion, in Australia, I feel like there's a bit more of a balance in terms of understanding people's different political views and things like that. So, I mean, that's my opinion on that.
Yes, and
I could be wrong.
And of course, it's better to see someone who is politically opposed to you as humans first, and as political actors second. I think that
we've got to see them as human. We're all human. The largest unit of society is we're human. The smallest unit of society is that we're individuals. I mean, I think I just really value, the ability to have a difference of opinion, but still be friends with someone. I mean, there's some people that usually, I'm from my experience, you're a Greens voter, you won't be friends with a Conservative voter. And part of me is like, well, why not? Why not just, obviously there are extremes on both ends. Like if someone's really conservative, they're anti-gay, they're anti this, they're anti that, probably unlikely to be friends with them. But in my opinion, if you're a Greens voter, Labour voter, Liberal, I mean, there's a few parties here that are small that are probably extreme. It's how you treat people that matters to me. It's not what you believe. Even if you believe homosexuality is a sin, but you treat me with compassion and grace, then I'm down for that. Because you can have people that believe homosexuality isn't a sin, but then treat you like garbage. So in my opinion, it all matters. What matters the most is how you treat people.
Yes. And of course, you always have to face the fact that there are people who hold objectionable political views, but who are like decent, kind people. And
Exactly.
Also people who share the same political views as you are indecent, and sometimes they are indecent and unkind people,
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been treated by more vitriol and hatred by my own LGBT community than I have by Christians. So it's kind of crazy. It's like we're supposed to all stand for love and inclusion and respect for each other, yet the way in which we treat each other sometimes is just absolute garbage.
Yes, of course.
Goes against what we outwardly stand for, which brings us back to virtue signaling.
So we are almost out of time here, so I'll grant you the privilege of concluding this show. So Melody, Rachel of the You Know I podcast, what do you have to say to, I guess, wrap up this lovely conversation?
What do I have to say? I mean, I've espoused a lot of my beliefs, but just treat people how you want to be treated. Emphasize commonality to sort of bridge that divide between us. And it's more important how people treat you than what they believe, and watch what people do, not so much what they say, because someone can verbally say all the right things, but if they're an inhumane person, then it's what someone does, it's what someone's actions that really sort of says who they are. And I do the You Know I Podcast. You can find that on Apple or Spotify. And my handle for social media is Melody Rachel K.
I'll include all that in the show notes once the show is published. But thank you again for joining the program.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and I hope that I don't come off as way too rambly because it's past midnight here, and I'm operating half 50%.
Oh, I better let you go. So. No, you did well. You did well.
Thank
cool,
you,
man. All right. See you later.